Express Nation, we are back with another episode. It is Monday, February 16th, and I'm going to go ahead and hop on that train of talking about my top 25 prospects. Y'all have probably seen a lot of analysts drop their top 25. I've yet to do it, so I figured, I was brainstorming a idea for this podcast and was kind of hitting a wall for there because I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to talk about. There's a lot of different film that I've been watching, college season's ending. There's a lot of new rules and regulations coming in. Obviously, a lot of different things have been going on in the transfer portal. A lot of things have been going down in the court, but also you have the NFL draft right around the corner. So I was like, let me go ahead and direct some time in talking about the NFL draft. I've yet to talk about my top 25 prospects. I haven't even talked about, the position groups. So I figured what's a better topic for today's pod? And that's talk about my top 25 prospects for the 2026 draft. And I'm also going to talk about my top 5 defensive ends or my top 5 edge rushers. It'll probably be a little bit better for me to say, and I will discuss why I said edge rushers over defensive ends. And we're going to go ahead and kick the thing off at number 1. This is a guy that for a minute there, he wasn't my number 1 guy on the board. I was kind of like everyone else that has given him a day 2 grade, or someone that's saying he should be taken in the later part of the first round because of his limitations with his arm size, because of his bigger stature, how he's kind of a compact. A lot of people are giving him that T-Rex label. But despite all of that, and he reminds me a lot of Jared Verse. Like Jared Verse only has 33 inches arms. Like that's his arm length. He only has 9.5 inch hands, not quite 10-inch hands. So when you're looking at a very similar player, that's who Ruben Bain reminds me of. Jared Verse is not as compact, but he has a very similar build. I mean, there's only 2-inch difference in between Verse's arm length compared to Ruben Bain's. Ruben Bain, I think, is reported in at like 31 inches. So there's not too much of a difference. And when you watch them play, I think Jared Verse could play from the 9 to the 3 or 9 to the 2. And when I'm talking about 9 to the 2, I'm talking about right there on the tight end, or around the tight end, and the 2 was where you're closer into the center and guard. Ruben Bain reminds me a lot of how Jared Verse played in college. So that's the comp grade I would give on Jared Verse. And just like Verse, a lot of people put him as a day 2, a late first rounder. And I really thought the guy was a top 10 just because of his play style. I knew he would be highly effective. And that's Ruben Bain. I think Ruben Bain is an excellent pass rusher. He's a phenomenal run stopper, but he's so stiff, it makes it really awkward to watch him play. I would honestly say because of how stiff he is, you would imagine the limitations that he has with his arm length. His 275 frame would make it very hard for him to make as many plays as he does. But what helps his game so much and what helps him elevate all his limitations is the way he's able to read plays. His recognition is probably one of the best out of his position group, probably one of the best that you will find in a defensive player in this entire draft class. In the NFL, that's one of the biggest things of, can you read a play? Can you go into the film room, dissect the film, piece together what you need to do, and replicate it during practice and spend hours in the film room, because that's where you make your money. That's where you grow your talents, is in the film room. And then you replicate and produce what you're seeing out at practice, and then you turn it into real time come game day. And that's where a lot of players in college don't really gain that much experience, but you can see it in Ruben Bain's play. Like, he spends a lot of time in the film room. So for me, he's a guy, he's top 5 without a doubt. If I had the number 1 pick, depending on the need. Now, once again, you always have to look at the need, but right now this is just prospect wise. To me, Ruben Bain's my number 1. Number 2 is Jeremiah Love. I don't think it's really a lot to say here, just because I don't think it's much of a debate. I don't think you should argue, is Jeremiah Love the number 2 prospect on the board? He most definitely is the number 2. He's the best running back in the class. He's one of the most athletic players in the class. Jeremiah Love is a no-brainer for me as the number 2 prospect. From there, it was kind of debatable. Two guys I kind of went back and forth on a lot are Mansour Delane and Francis Maligoa. For me, I think Mansour is the best corner in this class. He's the best DB, and Francis Maligoa is probably the best offensive tackle. So it was really hard to figure out who was going 3, who's going 4. But I settled on Francis at number 3. He's the best tackle, I think, with a lot of needs being for offensive line. If you're looking for offensive tackle, I would grab him 6'6", 315. I think and really and truly what separated him for me was just the fact that I was able to get extra film on him because of the playoffs. Because of the playoffs, I was able to watch his game a little bit more, and I fell in love. Mansour Delane, loved his play at LSU all season long. It didn't matter what LSU did. I knew Mansour was going to be a top 5 prospect coming into the draft. If I'm an NFL GM, I'm taking him in the top 5. The next corner I think is McCoy. McCoy out of Tennessee, 6 foot, 193, another similar build, but he plays very different than Mansour. Mansour is more of a technical, film savvy guy. McCoy, he uses his weight in coverage. And then from 6 to 8, not all receivers. Cardinal Tate, Makai Lemon, Jordan Tyson. Really and truly, you can swap those 3 guys. Like, it all depends on how you like your receiver, what kind of play do you want out of your receiver, what are you looking for. Cardinal Tate, deep ball guy, highly athletic. He can make all types of catches. His radius is insane, but I mean, it makes sense being 6'3". You should have an excellent radius when it comes to catching. Makai Lemon, for being 5'11", 195, he's able to utilize his small frame and his strength to make a lot of plays. You've seen it at his time at USC. And then Jordan Tyson, to me, is probably the best red zone receiver in the entire draft. If you had to lock in on one guy that you wanted to utilize in the red zone, it would be Jordan Tyson, especially for a team if that's where you struggled at during the season and you need that next guy. Jordan Tyson's your man. Followed by Spencer Fanu out of Utah, another tackle. This guy's the number 2 tackle for me in the draft. And a lot of the praises I could say about Francis, I can say about Spencer. Then to close out my top 10 is Cassius Howell. Cassius Howell, to me, probably early preview. As you can see throughout my top 10 list, he's going to be my number 2 edge rusher. I'll break down why when I start talking about my top 5. I kind of want to finish closing it out. At number 11 is Caleb Downs. I know a lot of people aren't going to like that Caleb Downs isn't a top 10 prospect for me. But with these other 10 guys, there's a lot of different measurables, different aspects into why I threw them top 10. A lot of it is because when you look at the style of play they do, it's a lot more consistent. You can fill them in anywhere. With Caleb Downs, to me, I feel like a certain team is going to have to take a chance on him because I don't think he's a safety at the next level. But I can make a whole nother video about it. I'm not trying to criticize his ability. I think he's a phenomenal athlete. Like, he's an athlete for sure, but I don't think he's going to be a safety at the next level. And then follow that at 12, you're going to have Fernando Mendoza. 13, you're going to have Colton Hood. 14, Elijah Shertan, followed by Mario Cooper at 15. 16, I will go Kenyon Shadiq. Ty Simpson followed 18. Then you're going to go linebackers at 19 and 20. Anthony Hill Jr., Jacob Rodriguez. 21, I would say Caden Proctor. 22 is Caleb Luma out of, I probably pronounced that wrong, another tackle out of Utah. 23, I would say, is Peter Woods. Is going to be another guy I'm going to be talking about in my edge rushers, which is R. Mason Thomas. If it wasn't for injuries, I think he would be a lot higher. But R. Mason Thomas is 24. And then 25 is Chris Braswell. Chris Braswell is another deep ball receiver, very similar to Cardinal Tate in style on how you're going to utilize them. Obviously, Cardinal Tate you can utilize in multiple different aspects, but when it comes to the deep ball play, I say Chris Braswell is probably just as exceptional as what Cardinal Tate is. But that rounds out my top 25. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of debates. I know especially around that top 10 range, a lot of people are going to question. Obviously, the biggest question that a lot of people are going to say something about Caleb Downs. And I just want to go back to the fact of him not being in my top 10 and what I said about him not playing safety at the next level. And it's not that I don't think he could make a good DB. You're seeing now in a lot of defenses in the NFL, your nickel plays that outside linebacker role. And a lot of that time is because of quarters or because you're running a certain man look and your linebacker's too unreliable. He's a reliability in pass coverage when you go man coverage. So you need that more heavy set coverage guy, but somebody that you can also, if they threw a run on you, you know he can close down. And to me, that's Caleb Downs. You can put him in that nickel set where he's kind of that hybrid DB linebacker. He's strong enough to be put in a man coverage situation against a lot of your offensive weapons. Now, you want Caleb Downs to go against someone who's running a Tyreek Hill type speed. I don't think Caleb Downs can cover your number ones like your Malik Neighbors or Chases or Jeffersons. But he can cover the number 2. He can cover the number 3. He can have a coverage on a tight end, follow the running back out on an arrow or on a check route. That's where you can start utilizing his pass coverage ability. But he's also big body enough to where you can utilize him in the run game. So he's that hybrid player a lot of folks are starting to use out of the nickel set. So that's why I say I don't think he's going to play safety at the next level, but there's a role for him. Like he's going to be on the field at the next level, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be at safety. But on from that, let's go ahead and talk about my top 5 edge rushers. And like I said earlier, I said defensive ends, but I wanted to make sure I changed that up and made sure I said edge rushers because when it comes to the edge, there's three different style of edge rushers. You're going to have your jacks. Those are going to be your hybrid backers. Those are going to be guys that could play a defensive end style, but they're jack linebackers. So they're outside linebackers that have that hybrid ability of being an edge rusher. They can play in the 7. They can play a 9. You might be able to squeeze a 5 out of them, but there's someone that they can set the edge, they can rush the passer, but you're comfortable enough in certain schemes, certain packages to let them go out in coverage. A lot of the time that's going to be in your flats. A lot of the time it's going to be in a man coverage situation where they're spying the quarterback. So they might drop off and kind of just hover, or where they drop off into like a middle zone, little hook route zone where if the running back was to flare out, they can bite the running back on it. Then you're going to have your more traditional set defensive ends. These are going to be guys that are true to the nature. They can get into a 3-point stance. What I mean by 3 is they're going to have their one hand in the dirt, 2 feet down, hand in the dirt, 3-point stance. You got 3 points of contact on the ground, 2 feet, one hand, 3-point stance. You may see them in a 4, depending on how they like to run it. A lot of the time, your defensive ends are going to be a 3-point stance guys. You might see them in a 2. You might see them in a 4, but it's going to be a majority 3-point. Your jacks are going to be heavy 2. Heavy 2, what I mean by that, 2 feet in the ground. They're going to be kind of in a half stand situation. Their hands are going to be free where they can utilize it quicker. They can break off into coverage quicker. And then you're going to have those of your hybrid D lineman D ends, the guys that can go from a 9 to a 0. These are going to be guys that utilize the 4-point stance a lot. Like I said, 4 points going to be 2 feet, 2 hands in the ground. They're going to be heavy 4s, heavy 3s. You're not going to really see them a lot in a 2-point stance. And those are kind of the 3 style of edge defenders. And I just want to really emphasize, like, it all depends on how you prefer the game to be played. What do you want to see out of your edge defender? What do you want to see out of your defense? And what do you emphasize that's the most important aspect? And to me, I tried my best to make a list that combined everything. But to me, it's very important to be a run defender. I think to be an edge rusher, you have to be somewhat of a run defender. And a lot of the times, your edge rushers will come into college or come out of college where they can kind of get molded. You can't really get molded into the guy that can play 9 through 0. You have to already come out of college in that aspect. So a lot of your time, your defensive ends that aren't necessarily phenomenal in the passing game will end up getting molded into that hybrid D-line guy. And there's somebody that I'm going to talk about a little bit that is going to, in my opinion, that's going to be like that But, like, for example, he's somebody I have a mock for, but, like, Jalen Walker coming out of Georgia. He's an edge rusher. He's not really somebody that you would categorize as a jack, and he's not really somebody you'll categorize as a defensive end. That's why I said edge rushers, because him coming out of college, he couldn't really fit either mold, but he's someone that you could have coached into either mold. So I just want to give y'all a little breakdown on how I judge my edges and why I'm not calling them defensive ends. So to kick off the list, obviously Ruben Bain Jr. I mean, I can repoint everything that I said. He's the most well-rounded guy. He's more of the traditional style defensive end. You're going to get him in a lot of threes. You probably will get a 4 out of him, but he's going to be a heavy three-point stance guy. So he's your traditional defensive end, your traditional edge defender, 6'3", 275. You can criticize him for his 31-inch arms. I don't think it's going to be too much of a problem. Like I said, his high level of recognition, it shows that he watches film. Being an NFL player, if you're already knowing how to dissect film, you're one step above your entire competition. So Ruben Bain, to me, is the best edge rusher in this class. Number 2, this is somebody who I think right now fits that edge rusher category, but he's someone I would say leans more towards a defensive end, and that's Cassius Howell. He's the next best pass rusher, I believe, in the draft class, 6'2", 248. A lot of people would say he's lighter in frame, but I think you can bulk him a little bit. He reminds me a little bit of Will Anderson coming out of Alabama. And both guys, I think, needed to, get a little bit better in the run game, but they're so phenomenal in the pass game that you can take a chance on them. And they weren't so bad in the run game. It's where it was a liability having them on the field, right? The biggest critique that I could say to Cash's run game would just be him setting the edge. Like, he collapses too hard, which allows cutback. And as an edge defender, you're there to set the edge, so cutbacks, when they come your way, you're making the tackle. You're the cleanup guy if you're on the backside. If you're on the front side, which he does a really good job of setting the edge, following through, making sure his head stays on the out, and keep making the running back, bounce, bounce, bounce. When he's on the backside, he does a really bad job of setting the edge and then scraping down, but that is something that you can clean up. You're not going to get a whole lot of read options that's going to kill him because of that, but that cutback lane is you can see it on film. That cutback lane is going to cause a lot of problems in the league because you're opening up a lot of big plays for the running backs, because the difference between college and NFL, you're going to have too many top tier running backs that, depending on which division he goes to, that can exploit that. But overall, I think Cassius Howell is my number 2 guy. He's more of that. He's going to lean, I think, more towards the traditional defensive end. And that brings me to number 3, which is, it's a really hard number 3 because there's a couple different guys. David Bailey, Kendall Falk, R. Mason Thomas, Joshua Joseph, I think Zion Young, Keem Mezzador, a couple different. I mean, watching the film on all those guys, it was really hard to figure 3, 4, and 5 because I think there's so many flaws in the rest of the guys, but there's so many highlights. It all goes back to what type of edge defender you want. I would have to settle down. If I had to choose one just to be unbiased, I mean, there's someone that if you're just wanting a pure pass rusher and you're not really looking at the run game, I would say David Bailey goes to 3. David Bailey is probably, when you're looking at pass rushing ability, I think Ruben Bain, I think Cassius Howell's the best pass rusher. Ruben Bain's probably second best. David Bailey probably third. You can probably switch Ruben Bain and David Bailey 2 and 3 in pass rushing, but in terms of being a liability in the run game, David Bailey's a liability. I think when it comes to Bailey, he's going to really have to be coached up, and it all goes back to recognition. That's why Ruben Bain's my number 1. He's top 3 pass rusher in the class. He's probably the best run defender in the class. Cassius Howell is probably not as strong in the run game as Ruben Bain, but to me, he's the best pass rusher in the class. He's able to recognize plays, and David Bailey that's just a limitation, and I think that just goes back to coaching. Him seeing the play, knowing how to execute, knowing how to defend, Like, it seems a lot of the times watching him play, double teams are unexpected. Like, he's not expecting a double team. And I would imagine if you're watching film enough, you should know when a double team's coming your way because you see certain keys, you see certain cues come your way. So you can square your shoulders, you can stick your head out, you can extend out. Like, there's certain things you can do based off of what you watched in film. You should be able to anticipate when the double team's coming your way. You can at least watch the keys off the offensive line on if a double team's coming your way. So I think David Bailey needs to fix that a little bit. You can't be 4 to 5 yards off the ball in the running game. If I have to think of what David Bailey reminds me a lot of, it's more of that jack back where he will fall back into coverage a little bit. I think he's going to probably be molded very similarly on how TJ Watt was molded in the league. That's why I think the one team he should go to, being, I would say, mid to late first round, would be the Steelers. He could learn a lot of things from TJ. Somebody that I'll comp him to would be Jalen Walker coming when Jalen came out of Georgia. He's somebody like David could do it. Jalen Walker was doing it, but I wouldn't recommend throwing them into coverage. Just rush the quarterback. So David Bailey reminds me a lot of Jalen Walker coming out of college. You just rush the quarterback and nothing else. And they're so phenomenal at it. You really can't draft them outside of the first round just because of how phenomenal they are as a pass rusher. So number 3, David Bailey. Number 4 would have to be R. Mason Thomas. He's going to be another one of those. I would say he could also lean as a jack. He's super athletic. I mean, you're talking about athleticism between all these top 5 guys that I'm laying out. He's probably the most athletic edge rusher that I've seen so far on film. 6'2", 249. They saying a 4.6 40. He explodes, I would say 4.6 or under, somewhere around like a 4.5, 4.58, 4.55 40. This is a guy that could definitely be snuck into the top 15. But as of right now, he's a late round, I used to say guaranteed day 2 guy. Injury histories is the biggest concerning part. He spent a lot of time last year dealing with injuries, and that's the only thing that holds me back on throwing him even higher, throwing him over David Bailey, honestly. It's just because I'm not quite sure how healthy he can be in his first year in the pros. Outside of that, I think the guy's phenomenal as a pass rusher, run defender, definitely more well-rounded than what David Bailey is. He's not as exceptional as a pass rusher as David Bailey or Cassius Howell, but if you're talking about complete style of an edge rusher, just like Ruben Bain, he's probably the next best well-rounded guy that you can find. And then at number 5, Keldrick Folk. He's a lock at day 2. I wouldn't take him first. I don't think he is a first rounder, but he's a lock at day 2. He's 6'6", 285. He's definitely somebody that I would say fits that defensive end, D lineman, 9 through 0, 9 through 0 whole defender. He has decent speed. I mean, his get off isn't next level. That's why there's a lot of things I would say he needs to work on, but he's a heavy 4 technique guy. He's someone I think you can throw in a 2 or throw in the 3 and the 2 hole or 3 hole, and you can expect him to close the gap. I think he sets the edge pretty well, but he's not a super dominant pass rusher. Like, he's probably the least dominant pass rusher out of the 4 guys I've already said. I mean, and there's a couple of other guys in the top or in this draft altogether that are probably more dominant than him in the pass rushing aspect, but he's such a utilizable key in the running game. I think you can almost ignore him just being an average pass rusher, grow on that aspect, because he reminds me a lot of Aaron Darnold, Chris Jones, somebody that you can play in a 2, you can play in the 3, you can play him in a 7. I mean, you can work him through the defensive line. And I think that speaks volumes, and you can take that over, and ignore the fact of him just being an average pass rusher. So when you look at my top 5, you got Ruben Bain at 1, Cassius Howell at 2, David Bailey at 3. Number 4 would have to go R. Mason Thomas, and number 5 would have to go Keldrick Folk. Like always, if you want the video format to kind of get a better feel, go to YouTube. I post it on there, Football Express. I'm always dropping or trying to drop as much content as I can on other socials like TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram, Threads. You can always find me at Football Express. And like always, check out Substack. It's where I'm starting to try to post more articles, really trying to break down the way I watch film, the way I dissect it, and why I am telling you what I'm telling you. So, like always, if you want to listen to more, check out the social links that I will be putting in the description. All the commenting, the liking, the subscribing really goes a long way. And if y'all have any questions, anything that you personally want to ask me and you want me to answer in the next podcast or in a separate video on one of my other socials, I'm always free to do that. Like always, thank y'all for enjoying the Express Nation, and I'll see y'all in the next one.